Good day everyone, and welcome to my video demonstration on using the what if tools that we're covering this week in our Excel module. For this week you will need to make sure that you turn on the solver add-in tool. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I'm going to go up here, I'm going to go to the backstage view, so I'm going to go to the file button, and then once that comes up I'm going to scroll down here to the options button. You see how that was in the left part of the navigation bar there. Then we're going to go to our add-ins. So when we scroll down, we'll see our add-ins right here. Once you've clicked on that, scroll down here to where it says Manage, and you're looking at your Excel add-ins here. Click the Go button, and make sure that the Solver add-in is checked. Once you do, if it's not checked, go ahead and check that, hit OK. And now you should be able to see that you have the Solver add-in tool available to you to be able to use. To make sure that you have that, come up here and click on the Data tab here on the ribbon. Once you've clicked on the Data tab, you'll see way over to the right in the Analyze grouping the Solver tool or the Solver add-in. So make sure you have that done before continuing with your work this week. If you have a Mac, there's a way to get to it as well. You're going to click your tools, then you're going to click your Excel add-ins just like I demonstrated here, and then you click the Solver add-in option to enable it. And then once you've done that, you've made sure that it's checked, click OK just like we did here on this Windows machine. Alright, I'm going to use this file as my example on demonstrating the what if tools. So we've got this scenario here that our client Dwayne Lebinsky works for Cairo Consulting. You'll see Cairo Consulting everywhere on this workbook. As an intern, he's been developing a workbook that includes the financial details of the consulting services that the company offers. Dwayne has been asked to analyze the data to find the most profitable mix of offerings using the most cost-effective service providers that are available. Here on the management worksheet, we're going to create a one variable data table to calculate the sales expenses and the profits based on the hours of management consulting that was contracted. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to go here to cell D5. So make sure you click in cell D5. Here we're going to enter a formula. We're not going to use a function. All we're going to do is reference the value that's in cell B4, which if you look at cell B4 over here, this is just the expected hours of management consulting that are contracted. So we're just going to reference that, and without using a function, we simply just put equals B4. And we see that now we have the hours sold, the value, here in our cell. So we'll know that this is what is listed here. So if this would change, it will change here. And we know that once we figure this, and we'll be able to look at this one, we'll also be able to see what if the hours contracted were less or more once we do our what if analysis here. All right, let's go to cell E5, so we'll go right next to that. What's our total sales? Well, we know if we look over at our table there on the left side, we'll see that we are looking for the values in cell B19. So total sales, B19, we're going to reference B19. So without a formula, once again, just equals B19. I'm going to tab over our total expenses. You guessed it, that's going to be B20. Tab one more time for our gross profit, and you guessed it, that will be B21, because as we see here, gross profit, here's our value for B21. So equals B21. Alright, so now we've got information from our section over here, our individual tables over here. We've put into our what if analysis table here, where we're trying to figure out our profit analysis. So we've got various hours that are contracted, and based off those hours that are contracted, how does that affect our sales? Because if we go down through here, we'll see where we have information that's built in over here that's figuring up all of our information. So this hours sold makes a difference because it is referenced in some of the formulas. As you see here, our total sales is whatever value is here times the price per hour, and we can that makes a big difference in all of our calculations. So that's why we're doing this table here. All right, let's go ahead and create our one variable data table, and we're going to use the cell B4 here. We're going to use that as our column input cell for our variable. So we're going to select our table here. So now we're going to do D5 through G10. So make sure you select that. Then we're going to come up here to our data tab. We are going to come over here to our forecast group, what if analysis. Drop that down, you'll see that we have scenario manager, goal seek, and data table. Well, I just said we're going to do a one variable data table, so let's select data table. And as I said, we are going to use cell B4 as the column input. So just click in B4 or type it in and hit OK. So when it figures these up, it uses this cell, this value, as, hey, this is where the column of data that's going to change is located. So it will go through and use these. So we see we have our one variable data table created. So what we can see from this is, okay, that if hours contracted are 7,500, our total sales will be 2,325. So this times our price per hour. Our total expenses are going to be this value, which we know because we put that in. And you can see that total expenses are calculated here from taking the value in B12, our total variable costs, plus B14, our total fixed costs. That's how we get our total expenses. Then our gross profit, which comes from B21, which is our total sales minus our total expenses. That's what we get. So when we create a one variable data table, it goes through and changes the value in the column because we selected a column input. It puts in 6,500 over here and then figures up what the total sales would be because that would change to this. Then it figures up the total expenses, makes that change, and the gross profit. It does all that work for us. All we need to do is use the built-in function of the what if analysis tool to create one data variable table. We can also do two data variable tables, as you saw with the pop-up window there, and we put in our column input. So we know that if we charge up to 8,500 hours, then our gross profit would be $120,000 more by just adding an extra 1,000 billable hours. So that is the point of our table, and everything makes sense. If we have less than 7,500, which we know these values, these static values, then this is how much less our expenses are going to be, how much less our sales are going to be, and obviously a lot less profit. So we're barely above the break-even point if we only have 6,500 hours sold. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Because now I want to create a two variable data table to calculate the gross profit that's based on the hours of management consulting contracted and the hourly rate charged. So we're going to look at this range here where we've got this D14 through K19, and we're going to create a two variable data table using the hourly rate charged, which is here in B5, as our row input cell. Then we're going to use the management consulting contracted values again, hours sold B4. We're going to use that as our column input cell once again. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We don't have to put any of the information in because it's already here. We're just saying, hey, my row input cell is going to be my price per hour, row price per hour, and my column, just like up here, is my hours sold. So we do the same thing. Go to our data tab. We come to our forecast group, what if analysis, data table, and our row input. So for our price per hour, we're going to select B5. And for my column input, I'm going to select hours sold. Hit OK. And now we have a two variable data table that shows us how things change when we change the price per hour value whether we go up or down, because we see here is our 310 value and our 7500 is here, so we see we match those two up and we have our variable values. So we know if we charge this amount, we do this many hours, what our value is going to be. Now obviously it's common sense that the more we charge and the more hours are going to be the greatest amount of gross profit we're going to get. But this tells us our different ranges, so we know where our break-even point is. We can see that if we're charging $300 an hour and we bill for 7,000 hours, we're only breaking even. If we do less, we're in the red, we're losing money. So this gives us an idea of where we need to be charging and how many hours we need to get for consulting. Alright, let's go ahead, and this value really doesn't make sense here. So let's do a custom format of this cell so we display different text. So I'm going to just right click on that. I'm going to format cells. Once my format cells dialog box pops up here, I'm going to select a custom, and I'm going to put in here what exactly I want to be displayed. So we're just going to call this hours divided by price because that's what makes sense. And I'm going to put quotes around that because I'm working with text, and you can see that's exactly what's going to be displayed here. So I'm going to hit OK, and I didn't have the actual cell selected, my apologies. There we go. Format cells, custom, hours contracted, or no, undo's my friend. Format cells. Sorry, I thought it was already in there from where I put it just a second ago, but it was not. Alright, so custom hours divided by price, end quote. Now the value is still there. You can see that it here in my formula bar, it says the value of whatever in the cell B21, which B21 is right here, but that's needed for our formula for our two-way variable table, but it's not needed for the person that's looking at this chart to understand it. So hours, price. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on. Let's go to this next worksheet. Let's go to the change worksheet here. Take a look at this from Chiro Consulting organizational change. So we've got a break-even analysis that's been performed here. Alright, we're going to create a scatter with a straight line chart based on the data range D4 through F14, so our sales and our expenses. So we're going to go ahead and create that scatter with straight line chart. As you know, once you select the information, like we've done in previous weeks, just go up here to the Insert tab, go to your charts group, and find that scatter with straight line chart. So drop down, there's our scatter charts. Scatter with straight lines, we select that. Now we've got chart that we're obviously going to modify because we've modified every chart we've ever created in this course. First of all, let's move this over to, let's move it down below our break-even analysis. We're going to put this in B15 for our top left corner. Looks good there. And we're going to put it down through H32. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Go over through H. And I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Make sure I'm into row 32. Now I can definitely read that chart a lot easier. Alright, let's go ahead and remove this chart title because it means absolutely nothing. So we got our chart elements. Just uncheck the chart title. It's gone. Our chart automatically expands a little bit so we have more actual viewing space of the chart. Alright, let's go ahead and add some more stuff. Let's add some titles here, axis titles. For this one over here, let's make this sales and expenses. And let's add one here. We'll call this one hours contracted. Chart is definitely looking better here. Now let's change the bounds axis here, because we have a lot of extra space. It just makes it look a little odd. So let's go ahead and change our minimum bounds. So let's go ahead and right click our axis here and change our bounds of our vertical axis. So I'm going to right click there. I'm going to format my axis. I'll get this pop up. You see here my bounds. I'm going to leave this maximum at 2 million, but I'm going to change this one here to 1 million. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it up here in my minimum and change that to a 1. Now when I click down here, you should see that change. Brought it much down here. Looks much better. So we got 1 million as our minimum vertical axis and 2 million as our maximum vertical axis. Now let's continue to make it look a little bit better, because we know this is a dollar amount. So let's change the number here. And we are going to select currency. And we're going to leave that to 0 decimal places, and you see how that looks. Alright, let's change our horizontal axis now. So let's format that one. We see we have our minimum maximum bounds here again. So let's go ahead and change our minimum to 3,000. And for our maximum, let's change that to 5,000. Now that looks much better, because we see much more of our graph and less of just non-essential white space. Alright, I'm going to close my format axis dialog here. Look at my work, and let's go on and create some more changes. Alright, our customer sent us this screenshot of a couple different scenarios that he wants us to put into this worksheet, where we're going to give our scenario a name. We're going to say what, in this scenario, the variable cost per hour change would be this. In the other scenario, the change would be this. In our first scenario, we want our total fixed cost. What would happen if it was this value? And the same thing for scenario 2. So let's go ahead and create our scenarios based off of this information. Alright, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select my range, so we can create these scenarios to compare the costs for the standard consultants and the consultants with the change certification as follows. Let's do this. In our scenario manager, we're going to add those 2 scenarios. And we're going to do that by going up to the data tab, going to the forecast group again, and the what if analysis object. We're going to select that again. And then this time we're going to select scenario manager, as I showed you earlier. Alright, so we'll do just that. Data, what if analysis in the forecast group, scenario manager. We don't have any scenarios right now, so of course we're going to add a scenario. And we're going to call this first scenario just like it was on our image that our client sent us. That was standard. And the cells we're going to change are going to be B11 and B14, so we're just going to put that in here. B11, comma, B14. That is our variable cost per hour change and our total fixed cost. So B11 and B14. Alright, so we've got that one created. I'm going to hit OK. Now we're going to give it the values. Those values for our change, because it's currently seeing what's there. We're actually going to change that to a different value. We'll make that 380. And our total fixed cost change is going to be 380,000. I'm going to hit OK. I'm not going to show this. I'm going to go ahead and add our second one for our certified. So we'll call that certified. Same values. And our actual numerical values changes are going to be 420 for our cost per hour and 335,000. Now we have our scenarios created. Okay, we'll go ahead and close this. We're not going to show the scenarios yet. We're going to go ahead and close that. Now let's switch over to our process worksheet. And looking at this information we have here, our net income analysis that was created for us. Let's take this information and create a scatter with straight lines chart based off this data from D6 down through I-14. All right, let's go ahead and create that scatter chart with straight lines. So we'll go to our Insert tab once more. Charts, we are doing a scatter chart. So we'll drop that down, and we are doing, once again, a scatter with straight lines. All right, let's move this down here to D15. That'll be right below where the actual data is coming forward. And we'll increase our size. We'll run take this down to I-32. Looks good there. Now we can see a lot more of our chart, which looks pretty ugly because of the way that it's formatted. But before we do that, let's remove this chart title. So we're going to remove that from our chart elements. Uncheck that. That's gone. We kind of do a little resizing there automatically. Let's move this chart legend. We're going to put that on the right side. So I'm going to come here to the legend in my chart elements. And we're going to move that to the right side. There we go. Once again, we have a more graphical area here. Let's add a vertical axis title over here. Go ahead and add that. And we're going to go ahead and put a horizontal one too. All right, let's call this vertical axis here. Let's call this net income. And we'll call this one down here, it's based off the hours. We're going to call this one hours contracted. All right, so our chart's definitely looking better. Let's change the colors of our chart. So we're going to come up here, drop this change colors down from our Chart Tools Design tab, the Chart Styles group. We're going to use monochromatic. Let's just go ahead and select palette 1 here. Alright, those colors look a little bit better and a little bit better in theme with the rest of our worksheet here. Now to make this look better, let's go ahead and do like we did earlier and change the bounds. So I've got my vertical axis here. I'm going to right click on that and select Format Axis. Get my bounds up here, and I think I'm going to change these to a -100,000. And I'm going to change the maximum bounds from 6 million. We're going to change that to 650,000. Or go ahead and change that now. $650,000. All right, so from 600,000 to 650,000. Make that change. Now let's go ahead and make another change here. Let's change this horizontal axis to cross at -100,000. You'll see a big change here when we put this in. I'll click out of that or hit enter. Now that definitely looks a lot better. We don't have any overlapping. We see that it will cross at -100,000. but we haven't actually hit negative 100,000. We actually have negative 92,500, so this looks a lot better than what we started out with. All right, once again, we know we're dealing with currency amount here, so let's change this. We're going to come over to our number grouping. We're going to drop that down. Our category is going to be currency with 0 decimal places, so we'll take this down to 0. And that looks a lot cleaner since we know that we're dealing with dollar amounts over here. All right, let's work with our horizontal axis now. I'm going to format that. So let's right click that, select format axis. All right, so let's change our minimum bound here to 3,500. So 3,500 for our minimum. Look at that, we have a lot less white space there with that change. We'll change our maximum to 7,500 since we see that's where it's ending. And now we are looking at just our series of data. We don't have any crossing over on our axes. Nothing's overlapping. We have a good color scheme. So that's looking a lot better, but I don't like this here because it doesn't really tell us anything. So let's change these series. Now there's different ways we can do this. As an example, I can click on series 1 here, and from here I can change it by going up here into my Chart Tools Design tab, the data group, select data, click that. Now I have all my series here. I can select series and I can edit that, and I can give the series a name. And I can just change this. I'm just going to use cell E5 here because that's where we're getting the information from. So I can click on that. You see this is not going to change. It is a static value. We only want the series to be right here. So that's why we have an absolute value marked there. So I can hit OK. And now we see it's actually given a name here and on my chart. We can do that for each and every one of these. So I'm going to click on series 2, edit that, select cell F5, hit OK. And so I'm going to do that for each one of these. Series 3, edit, OK. Series 4, edit, H5. And our last series, series 5, edit, I5, hit OK. And I'm going to hit OK because I'm done with that. Now I know exactly where this information is coming from, as I can look up here to my net income analysis chart. I haven't hit save in a while, so I'm going to hit save. And now that our chart looks so much better, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the Process Providers worksheet, because Cairo Consulting wants to determine whether reselling process consulting services provided by third parties would reduce the cost of this type of consulting. So over here we're going to run the solver tool to solve this problem. Let's go ahead and do that now. So let's bring up the solver tool as I showed earlier. Alright, so we're going to go to our data tab, and there's our solver tool. There's what the solver tool looks like. We're going to create an objective. We can set all of our parameters in here. If we want to run it, we can run it, or we can just save it. We have a lot of different options built here for our solver tool. So we're going to set the objective as minimizing the value that's in cell E10, which is our total cost. So I'm going to select E10, move this out of the way so you can see that. It's our total costs. You can see that is an absolute value. Then we're going to use the range B4 through D4 as our changing variable values, or changing variable cells. So I'm going to select B4 through D4. So now I've said set this value to the minimum value based off changing the values in these cells. Now let's set some constraints. I'm going to add a constraint, and I'm going to reference cell E4. I want that to be equal to 5,500, so I'm going to set the equal, and my constraint is 5,500. I'm going to hit OK, or I can click the Add button. Now let's create another one. We're going to say if cell E10 is less than or equal to 135 or 1,350,000. 1,350,000. So that's another constraint. Let's add another constraint. We're going to say that cell reference B4 to D4 is less than or equal to 5,000. And lastly, I'm going to say that another constraint is that any information B4 to D4 should be an integer. Hit OK and see what our constraints look like here in our solver tool. There's all the constraints that we created. Let's go ahead and run our solver, and we're going to keep our solution, and then we'll return to our solver parameters dialog box. So we make those changes here, keep solver solution, return to the solver parameters box, gonna hit OK, and then we're gonna save our scenario, or save this model to a cell range A14 through A21. That's where we'll see our results. Alright, so I'm going to click the load save button here. I'm going to tell it where I want to complete the work at. And I want it from A14 through A21. And there we have that. I'm going to click this, go back. Now that I have that, click the save button, and our information gets put in there. And it went through each of those conditions or criteria that we created. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and hit close. That's been completed. Now let's switch to our all types worksheet. So I'm going to click over here, and I'm actually going to hit the save button just because we made those changes. We ran our solver tool. Now we're going to use another tool in our what if analysis, the scenario manager that I showed you earlier. We're going to use our scenario manager to create a scenario summary report that summarizes the effects of the status quo, the third party, and the raise rates scenarios. So we're going to use the range B17 through D17 as the result cells. Let's go ahead and click that now. What if analysis, scenario manager. You see there are the three scenarios that were already built for us in this workbook. So we're going to click on the summary button here. Then in our summary dialog box, we're going to say what the results cells are, and we said that that was B17 through D17 just as it's selected. Then we're going to hit the OK button. Now that scenario is being run, you can see the spinning wheel, and we get our scenario summary worksheet added to our workbook that runs all three of those scenarios: status quo, raise rates, and the third party. So we have all the information there from those three scenarios. Alright, let's go back to our all types worksheet here. Take a look here. Alright, let's create a scenario pivot table report for the same result cells. So go back up here, what if analysis, scenario manager. We're going to do a summary again. This time we're going to select the scenario pivot table report based off of those same cells. These are our result cells. I'm going to hit OK. And our pivot table gets created. And we know that it's a pivot table because we see our pivot table tools. We have our tabs up here for the analyze and design. We can click anywhere in our table, and we can come up to our Analyze, we can see our field list, so we can see what all fields were added and the information that was created for us. We have profit per hours. We have all of this that was already created for us. We didn't have to do anything to create this pivot table, but we're going to make some changes to it. Let's remove this filter. Different ways you can do it. I'm just going to remove it. There, it's gone, so that filter's gone. Let's make a couple other changes. Let's change the number format of our profit per hour contracted mana, profit per hour contracted channel, and profit per hour contracted process. Let's change all of these. We're going to change these to currency with 2 decimal places, and we're going to make sure we use the $ as our symbol. And let's also change the labels for these. You know, this should just be management, this should just be change, and this should just be process. So let's go ahead and make those changes now. So I'm going to go over here, drop that down, see our value field settings whenever we are working in a pivot table here. Now I'm going to change the name. We're going to call that management. And I said I'm going to change the number format of that. We're changing that to currency with 2 decimal places, and the $ is our symbol. So I hit OK. Hit OK one more time, and that makes it look so much better. Let's do the same thing for these. Value field settings, we're going to call that one change and make it the same number format. Currency 2. OK, and we'll change the last one. It's going to be process. Looks a lot better, and we'll change the number format to be consistent with what we did with the other ones. We'll hit OK. Hit OK. Our pivot table looks so much better already. Let's format the report title, and we're going to change that. So we're going to go to cell A1. Let's give it a title. Let's call it profit per hour contracted. Because that makes good sense of what we're doing here. And we want to make this, we're going to change the style of this to a title. So if we come up here to our home tab, styles group, drop that down, look for title. Right there's title under title and headings. You see the changes as you hover over them. So we're going to select title. We're going to resize our columns here, A through D. So we're going to select those. We know how to do that. Let's make this 15. Do whichever method you prefer to do. I'm going to do column width here on the cells group format. 15.00 to make it specific. Hit OK. Now we can definitely see our data so much easier on this page. Alright, now that we have that looking so much better, let's go ahead and add a pivot chart to our scenario table here. So make sure you've clicked anywhere in your pivot table. Then we're going to come up here. We're going to insert. There's different ways you can do this, of course, but this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to come over here to pivot chart. And let's select the clustered column pivot chart. It's already selected for us. I'm going to hit OK. Chart gets created for us right away. Simple thing, we didn't even have to select any data. It says, hey, I know this is a pivot chart or pivot table. You would like a pivot chart? Here you go. And you see we have pivot chart tools available to us now. Let's move our pivot chart. Let's move it up here right under our table. We're going to put that where we're going to select it. Put it right here in A8 and put our bottom right corner down into D20. So bring this in just a little bit. There we go. I'm going to increase my view on this one a little bit so you can see it better. Close this. Now that we have this, let's hide the field buttons in the chart. We don't want to see those. So let's come up here onto our pivot charts, the Analyze tab, show high group. You can see how this is all grayed out. That means it's an active button. So we're going to deactivate it by clicking it one more time. And you see now we've hidden all of those field buttons. Well, that looks like that takes care of all of the customer requirements from Dwayne Lipinski and Cairo Consulting. So that is it for my demonstration on the What If tools. I hope you're able to find this information helpful. Good luck as you continue to work through the What If tools modules. Take care, everyone. Don't hesitate to